burning our way through another hour here on the Jake Feinberg Show. Welcome back inside the studios of Power Talk 1210 KEVT Sahuarita, Tucson. The Jake Feinberg Show is brought to you in part by the Stereo Hospital, the Circle Tree Ranch, and Abbott Taylor Jewelers, and we thank you for being part of the program today. To learn from a master and then become one. To see his master giving of his time, completely ubiquitous in an array of polyrhythms, with his master's sarod weaving in and around the myriad of percussive instruments that inhabited my guest's master's school. My guest was the director of the Ali Akbar College School of Music in 1968 as he learned the darabuka, derbeki, and dumbeg. He blended his native Middle Eastern rhythms with American-based blues, European swing, free jazz, and psychedelic rock. He was part of Mickey Hart's Diga Rhythm Band and Thalil and the Kashba Band. He's played with everyone from John Handy to John McLaughlin and many of his peers like Ali Jihad Raisi. Walking along in the Mission, in the rain, Vince Delgado. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Jake.
How you doing, brother?
Okay.
You know, it's just such an honor to talk to you, man, and I wanted to ask you, you were... in the 50s, you were a jazz percussionist?
Yeah, originally from the age of 12, I was a set drummer.
You were a trap drummer?
Yeah.
So I really want to know, were you on any recordings and didn't get any credit for it in that time, or did you play?
No, because I was so young and I was in that learning stage, you know. But my peers at that time were like Vince Guaraldi.
I love it.
Who was at a different high school, and there was kind of an underground group of young people who had discovered bebop and after swing, you know. I went through the swing period, and then I went into bebop when I heard that, and, you know, there was no work at that time for anybody, but I was in a couple of big bands in high school for school dances and stuff, and, you know, trying to get gigs and that kind of thing.
A couple things. What is your ethnic heritage? Like, where do you come from?
I was born in San Francisco in the Mission. I'm Mexican-American.
You're Mexican-American, and yet you gravitated to all this amazing Middle East. How do you account for the fact that you gravitated towards the darabuka and all these amazing percussive instruments, and you are Mexican?
Right. Well, there was a program in KPFA from Berkeley, you know, that had a guy who used to have an hour program on Sundays, and he would play at that time, which was considered ethnic music, and little bits and pieces from Folkways, you know, those LPs, those old LPs, and me and a buddy of mine who had hung out together since the second grade got interested in world music, and we would listen to that program every Sunday just for an hour. Indian music, Afghani music, Pygmy music, all kinds of music, and really fascinated by it. But of course, our real interest was in jazz. But we had such interest that my friend became an ethnomusicologist and started the first world music program at Seattle, at University of Washington in Seattle.
Wow.
So you know, I tried to do that too, but I wasn't very good with academia.
Mm-hmm.
So
we'll get into it. Well, there's many different ways of. I mean, you were more of a street scholar. Is that what you're saying?
A what?
Like I call it a street scholar. You know, a guy who.
Oh yeah.
You know, more somebody who just wanted to burn, who wanted to play, and you're not writing papers and citing people from.
No.
You know,
I wanted to play.
Exactly. Going back for a minute here. Can you unpack the word when you talk about underground? When you and Guaraldi, can you talk about one of those bands that you've put together there was no work, but you were experimenting?
Well, I mean, at first when we heard, you know, first my heroes were like Baby Dodds and Big Sid Catlett, that era of New Orleans music.
Right.
And then when Charlie Parker appeared on the scene, I couldn't understand it right away, so that made it more fascinating, right? So
right.
I listened to it for a while till it finally made sense. And then I met other kids around San Francisco who also had gone through that kind of experience. So at that time, bebop wasn't very popular. We're talking like the late 40s, high school. So there was hardly any work, and we did get a gig here and then in a bar. People were saying, "What are you doing? Why don't you play some rhythm and blues or something?" This is like, you know what I'm saying?
I love it.
We kind of knew, right, that its time hadn't really come yet.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it has now, of course, but I mean, and I'm still doing it, but at that time, it was really kind of hard,
How did you, how did you overcome that adversity? I love talking to you guys because you didn't have a lot of digital technology at your disposal, and yet you did face adversity from a sociological point of view. And was it just the natural curiosity that kept you going forward? Because, you were really playing a totally new language.
Yeah, exactly. But the way I learned, I discovered in the Fillmore in San Francisco, there were two large ethnic groups. One was the Japanese Americans who lived there, and then the African Americans who also lived there. And there were 3 after-hours clubs, which minors weren't supposed to go to, but I did.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of musicians from all different parts of the United States would go there after gigs, and jam. And so, besides listening to recordings and stuff, I watched, right? And when and there would be a kind of a funky trap set there, and then a piano in a restaurant,
Yeah.
And if a drummer didn't show up, I got to play,
Right.
And if a drummer did show up, then I played bongos. But that was a more natural thing for me because, being a Latino, I grew up with that music. But if Armando Peraza showed up, then I didn't get to play at all.
No, but this is so great, Vince. It's so great to connect with you. Can you talk about the Fillmore district specifically, and the cats who would come in and who not even necessarily drummers, but just cats that came in and would just they just burn and they opened your mind and it made you just forget about all the naysayers and the wet blanket people and all the people that were like, just play some rhythm and blues, man.
Yeah, no, it was fascinating because when you don't know something,
yep,
or you become fascinated by it. Like that's what happened to me with Indian music. I mean, what are they doing?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
Anyway, so I went there and I don't even know who these people were, to tell you the truth. But they would show up after 2:00 in the morning, and I was only like 15, and I got busted once by the plainclothesman policeman for being out late, 4 in the morning in the African American district, and but that's where I got to hear a lot of people play, real soulful bebop and all kinds of African American music in these after hours places. Just watching and listening, plus listening to recordings and stuff.
Right. And
so that's what I did.
Do you feel like the explosion that occurred in the 60s, how much was the Mission District responsible, and those kids like yourself, those cats like yourself from the city of San Francisco, how responsible were you guys for planting those seeds? And like you talked about the Japanese community and the African community in the 50s, how responsible was that for the explosion of music that we saw in the 60s?
I don't think it was very responsible, actually, except for one club, one after-hours place was opened by Slim Gaillard, and it was called Vault City, and it was not successful at all, and so he sold it, and he sold it to, I think the guy's name was Jimbo or something, and he called it Bop City.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
And I don't know if he did a lot of payola or whatever he did, but like it started jamming,
Oh yeah.
But then there were really, really good musicians going there. It wasn't just like they came after a gig; they were working there, right?
Sure.
So and then it was so crowded and it was so successful that I didn't really go there very much, especially being a juvenile,
Mm-hmm.
and most of the thing was blues. It was blues and that kind of thing. So, as successful as it was, I didn't get to go. But I did join a band that was in the Fillmore. That was Wilbur Brown's big band, and he was a doorman at Sherman and Clay. But he loved jazz, and he had this big band. And so I got to play there as a bongo player, and we did gigs all around the Bay Area and the Valley, playing for dances and that kind of thing. So there I got more experience doing that. But I got sidetracked. So I got sidetracked when I went to college, and I met a kid from Baghdad who was a singer and a drummer, and another kid from Beirut, Lebanon, who was a oud player and a singer. And we became friends. And the first gig that we did, somebody then hired us right away to play in this neighborhood club, and we were the first Middle Eastern group in 1960 in San Francisco.
Unbelievable. Okay, what was the name of that group?
It was called the Naji Baba Trio.
Oh, I love this. Do you have any recordings ever been released of that trio?
No, I had some stuff on cassette. I was mostly just kind of what I recorded was mostly just the drum jams that we had, as part of the music. But they were playing traditional music, traditional Arabic music.
Oh yeah.
And then we got tired of that, and the group kind of split up, and I went with the oud player to Broadway in San Francisco, and found an Italian restaurant which was doing no business, and the guy agreed to try Middle Eastern music and belly dancers, and I ended up working on Broadway for over 20 years.
Wow, there's just so much floating around in my head.
Yeah. Six nights a week, 5 hours a night.
Say it again, how many hours a day?
It was 5 hours a night, 6 days a week, for years and years.
Right. Vince, just stepping back for a minute, why? How do you account for the fact that our society at one time was willing to pay to allow musicians to play what they felt and to play music, as opposed to orchestrating something or a pay to play mentality that we've kind of come to today? Lack of venues. I mean, was it just the fact that we came out of World War II and embraced all this melodic improvisation? To me, it's like those gigs, those Italian restaurant gigs that so many musicians were able to survive on when you were coming up, they're gone now. Those don't exist now. And I'm just trying to figure out from like why was it that way then, and why isn't that way now?
I really don't know. But when I was working on Broadway, there were 3 jazz clubs also on Broadway. The Jazz Workshop, Basin Street West, and another one where Bolacete used to play all the time. Now I can't remember the name. But the whole street was jamming with live music, flamenco. There was Finocchios, which was the female impersonators, and then the couple of Arabic nightclubs, like I said, the Jazz Workshop, and it was just jamming. I don't know why exactly,
Can you talk about some of the musical settings that you were in that mixed, across different mediums of entertainment? Like it wasn't just strictly music, like the female comedians, or the idea that you might have had, sort of like an Oscar Brown Jr. kind of thing, where you might have had a poet rapping with you guys backing him. But the idea
I didn't do that very much, hardly at all. Mm-hmm. Tell you the truth. There was, but at that time there were a lot of poets, in North Beach, and there was that kind of thing happening, and it was just like spontaneous music, and with just drummers that go in and sit in, and maybe a poet would get up and read a poem or something. Nothing was planned. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
That was the time of Howl, right? Allen Ginsberg and a lot of poets, Lawrence Ferlinghetti. This is a long time ago. So
I know.
Don't remember all that stuff.
But it was the idea is that you guys all wore it with a badge of honor, that it was all spontaneous, right? Because that's ultimately I wanted you to talk to the audience specifically about the transcendent quality of music, because I believe very strongly now. We are moving. We've moved into a period of huge conformity, and a lot more about following a composer's lead, which is why you see a lot of support for classical music and a lot less support for the more melodic improvisation, and the fact that there's a whole myriad of things. I'd like you to talk about a transcendent time when you were playing music where you left your physical body, had a transcendent experience, because to me, there's only two letters that separate music and magic, right? So I want you to talk about a transcendent time in your career when you left your body and you realized, holy cow, this is a lot more than just, playing an instrument.
Well, truthfully speaking, that didn't happen for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
But it did happen eventually. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And it happened, when I was finally in my 50s, when I've been playing already since I was 11. It took that long for me to not think so much about what I was playing, but to experience the energy and the feeling of the people that I was playing with and myself in a blissful state.
Can you talk about that experience?
Well, I don't know. Blissful is the only way I can put it. Is when the music was really happening, then that's the time that I was out of my body. Whether people dug it or not didn't matter. What mattered was whether I was experiencing that.
Right. Well, we came in with a track called I'm not sure if you were able to hear it or not, but it was something that I listened to. I've been listening to in this week leading up to our conversation, and it's brought me quite a bit of peace. It was you and I think Ghosh, a tabla player, performing with the Grateful Dead in 1968 in San Francisco.
Where did you get that?
Okay, it's very available. There's several copies online. I'll send you a link to it. But I got 27 minutes, Vince, and I'm like, this is what it's all. I mean, because
that's because one of the who are those guys? I can't remember them. A rock group from Hollywood sent some cameramen up to. I put together that concert.
You did.
To raise money because I was the director of the college, the Ali Akbar College.
Yeah,
so
right.
I put that concert together to raise money, and so that we had this idea with Mickey and Bill Kreutzmann and Jerry Garcia to do this drum jam in one of their tunes. Right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Keep going.
So then, and then I always wondered what happened, because I know there were people with cameras out there. Crosby, Stills, and Nash, one of those guys had sent them up. For what reason, I don't know. But they did. And then I always wondered what happened, and I wonder if anybody had any film of it, because they did film.
Well, yeah.
Now you're telling me there was sound, and I even talked to Mickey about it, and they never could find anything.
Oh well, it's. I'll send you a link. It's really high quality too. And I'm listening to your playing. So can you talk about? I look back. The more I never saw the Grateful Dead play. Their music inspires me, and the more and more that I listen to it, it comes down to the two guys creating rhythm, which is Billy and Mickey, and I'm wondering, did you meet those guys in the Mission? How did you meet Mickey and Billy?
By being the director of the Ali Akbar College in 1968, that was the first semester when Ali Akbar Khan had his own school. We attracted 120 students and lots of people, like Sufis, rock and roll people, all kinds of people, right? And they would come around and hang out, and they didn't become students, but they were like interested in the phenomena that was happening, right?
Right.
That all these people were coming from different parts of the world to study Indian music, whereas when I first started in 1965, I took a class and I was the only student, and Ali Akbar Khan only had 4 students. I was studying drums, but when Ravi Shankar and the Beatles connected, the whole thing exploded.
That's right.
right? And so
Before you
that's
go,
how
wait,
that.
I want to go. When you went there in '65, it was called the Society of Eastern Arts. Is that right?
Yeah, American Society for Eastern Arts.
You have no
That's
idea how
65.
this is so for me, somebody who's 37 years old. I know that when I talked to there were only 4 cats left in the tabla in the drumming program, and I found 2 of them now. You
Oh, yeah.
and Magadini, right? Pete
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So now I'm so proud. So that's when you were a student, and
I
then
was the only student in 1965.
oh my God, dear. I mean that and that was before. It was Ali Akbar Khan. Was he in the States at that point or
Yeah, they would bring him over in the summer, right?
Mm-hmm.
For just like 2 months. And so the first time they brought him was 1965. And like I said, he only had 4 melodic students, and then Shantar Ghosh, the tabla player, had 1 student, me.
This is and so Mickey and Billy both came or just Mickey?
No. They didn't come till 1968.
No, I know that. I blew ahead 3 years there.
Yeah.
So you were the only student, and and then you connected with Shankar Ghosh and
No. The Beatles and Ravi Shankar connected,
right.
and that somehow triggered a huge interest in Indian music. So in 1966, still with the American Society for Eastern Arts, the enrollment was over 100. Just take that from 4 or 5 to 100.
That's awesome. That is so unbelievably
Right, and then in 1967, it was the same thing, and then Ali Akbar Khan wanted to do his own school, so he asked the older guys if they wanted to be on the board of directors, and then nobody wanted to direct the school, and I was tired of commuting to Fresno and working in an Armenian club, so I took the job without knowing anything,
right.
And there were 120 students, so I never went home,
Oh my God! I mean, put me back. That is Vince Delgado was you were in. Can you talk about Ali Akbar Khan? I just feel like it's important from a leadership. The first L on my program is leadership, and that dude could have easily taken off and become a mega pop star and done his own thing.
Yeah.
And he chose to say, no, I want people to know where the roots of the music came from. I mean, you talk about that leadership. Was it inspiring to you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, because we were so thrilled to get a teacher to come and want to be here and teach us of that caliber. His father was like a saint. His father lived to be 106 years old, and his father also taught Ravi Shankar.
Right.
Right? So he had a bunch of students, and he was revered in India because he lived so long and was a teacher of many people. And then when Khan Sahib came here, he was enjoying that. And the other thing that he enjoyed was that so many of the students that were studying Indian music were already musicians, and they could notate stuff like immediately that he was showing or composing.
Mm-hmm.
And in India, it's different. It's more by rote.
Sure.
You have to do it over and over until you learn it. Well, these students were like just, boom, writing it down, So I don't know if that's good or bad, but the point is that he really dug that. Then his compositional ability shone even more, right?
Right.
Because he didn't have to do something over and over and over. He could just say it, and people would write it down.
You have no idea how much I'm enjoying this. I mean, 4.5 years ago, I started my show. I think Magadini was like one of my first guests. I interviewed Ali Akbar Khan's wife and his son, Mary, and his son, and I just look at a guy like that. So by 68, how many students? You said it went from about 4 or 5 to 100 and something the next year in 66. When you took over the program, about 120 students.
Yeah.
And
then he stayed instead of the summer program because of the benefit that I did.
Right.
With the Grateful Dead and Steve Miller Blues Band.
Yeah.
I I've raised a bunch of money, and also I found a person who was kind of a dropout, and he loved Ali Akbar Khan's music, and he asked me how much I needed to keep it all going, and he wasn't even a student. And I told him, and he gave it to us, and then that enabled us to stay going all the time.
So, you befriended Mickey when he came to the school, and then because the Warlocks were still they were birthed in '65. Where would you say Mickey was at in his drumming wise in '68 when you met him?
I don't know.
But what he was addicted to rhythm and consciousness shift. He wanted to get out of the normal shift. So he came to and you immediately. I mean, how long did it take for you did you ask him to if they'd be willing to do the concert? How did that all come together?
Oh, they wanted to do it. They asked us to do it. Right? Like my teacher, Shantar Ghosh, he's a traditional, Indian classical drummer. He didn't know Grateful Dead. He doesn't know rock and roll. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't know anything about that. But he was open-minded, and we were very good friends because we were both like the same age, even though he was my teacher, but we were the same age. So we were kind of really close friends. And so when I asked the Grateful Dead if they would come and play and do it, then they had the idea for us to do a drum solo in one of their tunes. That was their idea.
And what was that, looking back on it, because when I send you this link, you're going to love it because it's just it's 26 minutes long. Yeah. What was you, what do you remember sort of, did it have what do you remember from that session specifically, from that live show?
From that show?
Mm-hmm.
Not much. I remember the music.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I didn't know the tunes.
Sure.
I didn't know the Grateful Dead. I didn't even know it was Steve Miller Blues Band. Like I said, I've always been a jazz musician, no matter what else I've done,
Right.
I've always been a jazz musician, and that's what I really love, and I still love that because of all the improvisational aspects of it.
Sure.
Even though I still perform Turkish and Arabic classical music, you know what I mean? And I don't even play Indian music anymore because my knees crapped out on me. But I don't know.
Well, I think what you're saying is that the Dead's music being so improvisational, it wasn't jazz, but you were able to fit into it pretty easily.
Well, I guess so. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, it's a long time ago for me, and I'm not sure what I heard.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I'm going to send it to you. I'd love to get your feedback on it. Did you meet Vukovic when he was doing the Jon Hendricks stuff on Broadway in Frisco?
No, I didn't. I met Vukovic because he came to a gig that I did at Bach Dynamite Dancing Society. And I was playing Middle Eastern music.
Wow.
And he was taken by it. So he invited me to go visit him when he had a steady gig, I think at Hyatt or something in Union Square. And we connected, right?
Yep.
Because I play a little tambourine. It's a classical Arabic tambourine. It's just played like a drum. It's not a shaker,
Mm-hmm.
And so I can swing on it and do bossa novas and that kind of stuff. So
I love it. I love this stuff.
So
go ahead.
I've introduced that instrument into my repertoire when I play non-Middle Eastern music.
I was just going back to your trap set days. I mean, who were some of the cats like that you really dug on when you were playing trap set?
Oh, Max Roach.
And why?
Well, because it wasn't the, not to get too technical, but it wasn't the 2 and 4 thing all the time.
That's right.
It was like a lot of syncopated stuff with the bass drum and the snare and writing the cymbal and that kind of thing. So that fascinated me. But I was influenced by a couple of drummers that who I don't even know what happened to them, but I went to a lot of jam sessions, just on people's houses and stuff. and there were a couple of drummers there who I really loved their playing, and so I used to go listen to them and watch them, and they had that style down, you know. I don't even know where they came from. I don't even know what happened to them.
Do you remember their names?
I remember one, his name was Bill Young, but I don't have any idea what happened to him.
I think I sort of remember seeing him on the back of that. I don't know. It's so interesting when you. It was about. It wasn't just playing on the 2 and 4. It was something just that it had a burning quality to it. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it did, but it had a lot going for it. You know what I mean? It had a lot of things that were happening that didn't usually happen. You know, and I played with a lot of trap drummers now as a hand percussionist. I played with Akita Tana and Eddie Marshall.
Oh yeah. Oh.
And I played a lot with Harold Jones, who plays for Tony Bennett now.
Love Harold Jones. Yeah, sure. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, and those were like in Larry Vukovic kind of bands, and you know, and they're all really good drummers. You know. So,
yeah, and they're not. I'm curious about when I interviewed Joe. I did a couple interviews with Joe Sample before he passed away, and he talked about younger drummers not really commanding. He doesn't hear the simple work that he used to. These old school drummers, Eddie Marshall, you mentioned, Max, just really, really knew how to use the cymbals. And I was wondering what your take on that.
Yeah, they did. But as another drummer in the band, sometimes these drummers are so good that they fill up a lot of things, right? So sometimes you don't get the space you want.
That's what I'm saying. I had Herb Albert on before you, and it's like we were just talking about the space within the music and creating that space within that is so crucial, because otherwise it's just like somebody who just won't stop talking. There's no space.
Yeah, well yeah. It's like when I used to work on Broadway, and there was the jazz workshop, and Coltrane was playing there, right? Sometimes Coltrane would be standing outside, just leaning on a parking meter, and inside Elvin Jones, the bass player, and the piano player are going absolutely crazy.
I love this. Oh my God!
You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I love it. I love it. Yeah, exactly. Trains.
Yeah, and so he was outside, just like ho hum, and he's leaning on his parking meter. You know.
I mean, yeah, you can't make this stuff up. You know, Vince, we have a track of music here I want to put in for you, and then we'll come back and talk about it, okay?
Okay, sure. Yeah. Sure.
All right, Mr. Delgado, what do you got for us, brother?
That's my daughter playing violin.
Mm-hmm.
That's Mimi Spencer on Kanun, Ali Jihad Rasi on ney, me on Egyptian tabla, and Mark Jacqua on Rick.
And the name of that tune was El Henna.
Right.
Okay, and I found this album, I found a couple of these albums now in Goodwill, thank God, 50 cents, what a bargain. I mean, I look on the back and I'm like, oh my God, okay, this is before I really understood who Vince Delgado was, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, produced by Mickey Hart engineer, Dan Healy. I said, what is going on here? Because this is the overlap that I just am intoxicated about. And I just want to make sure I'm pronouncing the name of the band. Jazz Air? Is that how you...
Jazire.
Jazire. Can you talk about the meaning of that word?
Yeah, Jazire means islands. Algeria, the country Algeria, is actually Al Jazeera, which comes from the word Jazire, which means island. Oh. So I guess the name of that country is the island or something. You know what I mean?
Oh, I mean, this is why I do my show. Please keep going. So Jazire, that was a family roots. How did that band come together? Can you talk about that?
Well, yeah. My second wife was Mimi Spencer, and then my first wife was Japanese American, and then that's my daughter Devi Jha, playing violin. She also studied Indian music. Actually, both of them did. Both the ladies in that band had studied Indian music, and were playing Middle Eastern music because I bribed them with money.
Dude, you are out of control. You had a Japanese American. Your first wife was Japanese American?
Yeah.
Oh my God. All right,
so my daughter was Mexican Japanese.
That is awesome. Awesome.
And I actually studied classical Japanese music myself when I was a teenager. I got a name through Alan Watts about a Japanese teacher who was really good, and so my daughter wanted to learn music, and so at the age of 5, I sent her to that, and then she got interested in Indian music at the age of 10, you know. So she was sort of on my path, kind of, you know.
I love this. Now, how did it wind up getting? Thankfully, it got a couple of your albums got pressed on record, and how did that all come to fruition?
Well, it's just because I wanted to do it, and Mickey was very helpful, and he didn't charge any money or anything, and he had this fantastic. It was a van that was filled with microphone stands, a Niagara recorder, all kinds of stuff, and I think he called it Mobile something #1.
Right, that's right.
Yeah, and then so if I had a project, he wanted to do it, and so he would go, wherever the project was, and I liked recording in churches, so. That recording was done in a church here in San Anselmo, in Marin County.
Delgado, Vince. We have to do. We have to pick up and do a part 2 at some point because there's a ton of things I didn't even get to with you today. But when you became the head of the Ali Akbar College school, what did you and Zakir make a trip to Mickey's barn to play? Yeah,
that's what we did, the Diga Rhythm Band.
Can you talk about that experience? Because that kind of organic music is really needed in this time. I mean, can you talk about just playing for how long you played for?
Well, actually, it wasn't so spontaneous. It was like really based on a lot of Indian stuff, and the common language that we have, of course, was the language of the Indian drums, right?
Right.
So there were 11 drummers, and 7, 8 of them knew how to speak that language. And so Rahka, Zakir's father, composed one thing, and Mickey composed something else, and one of the vice players composed something else, and I stuck my nose into this and that. And it took us a year to memorize all the orchestrated stuff, right? But there are solos interspersed in between these different rhythms, right? Different time signatures and stuff. So it was a big project. And you know what? It's never been done before. Nobody's ever made an album like that. That's just, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, you're talking about the Diga Rhythm Band, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we got to jam out, but Vince, I'm going to be in touch. I'd like to pick up part 2 with you real soon. All right. It was. I really had a ball, man. I hope you enjoyed it.
No, yeah, I did, man. Thanks a lot.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Hey, folks, okay. We'll be here next week. Thanks to Jackson Kraft. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. Have a beautiful weekend. Take care.
Again, is soazcc.org. Southern Arizona Community Church. Not a religion, a relationship.
Broadcasting live from the Tucson Original Studios. This is KEVT Sahuarita Tucson, the Tucson Originals, local dining at its best.